So I started watching the Kingdom anime from start to finish for the very first time, and honestly, I've been enjoying it quite a bit. I finished season 1 and I'm going to keep dropping these videos in parts and then a giant video like this one. Season 1 of the Kingdom anime is by far one of the most controversial things someone could choose to watch. And with season 6 dropping soon, I figured there was no better time to get into the actual Kingdom anime than now. It was something that I've definitely wanted to watch from the very beginning for so long. Now that I've finished season 1, I can say the animation is something that I got used to, instead of it actually improving. Before starting the Kingdom anime, I already knew what I was getting into in terms of that area. But let's not go off on a tangent, because I want to talk about how enjoyable season 1 was surprisingly. I'm someone that knows the masterpiece that is the manga and only breathes that. So pretty much every single thing that I know about the anime is through word of mouth or the comment section. I'll get into my main thoughts in a second. Let me just say the voice acting and OST in season 1 was amazing. I don't know if it was specifically one or the other or a combination of both, but by the end of episode 1, I was already thoroughly moved. Anyway, let's not waste any time and get straight into it. I've had many people tell me that the first 15 episodes of the Kingdom anime, the first arc, Seikyou's Rebellion, it's not going to be good. It's not enjoyable. The kids would say to thug it out until the first war arc. But it was a bit confusing to me when I was watching the first couple of episodes because I actually really enjoyed the arc. Obviously, it wasn't insanely good or peak, but it was good. To me, the first arc did a great job in setting up the lore of the Kingdom anime. In the first episode alone, we meet Shin and Hyou, the main characters. Both are aiming to be the greatest generals in history, hailing from the state of Qin. Hyou then dies. What? That means maybe Shin is the true main character. This first episode alone felt like the story already had so much to offer and tease. Like, let me sit forward and lock in real quick. Later on in this first arc, we then meet Sei, a guy that looks exactly like Hyou, but turns out he's actually the king of Qin. Maybe this guy is the main character. So a young boy who dreams of being a great general and a young king who possesses no military might to fight back against his evil brother Seikyou, who stole the throne. Truly a match made in heaven. This is what people mean when they say, and so the plot thickens. We even get to meet our first great general of the series, Oki. He is the pinnacle of what Shin is trying to achieve. There was a lot to offer in the first arc, but people say they don't like it because maybe it felt too slow or not as epic as one would expect for a romanticized story on the warring states, since I think a lot of people do know about the three kingdoms. I guess they're not completely wrong, but it comes together perfectly by the Keiyou Campaign arc's conclusion, which we'll get to. But I also like the first arc because you get to see all the stable characters having fun and messing around with each other, and some side characters are introduced into the story. This is Ten, Shobun-kun, Heki. It shows them and Shin all interacting with each other, and kind of gives that classic comedic anime feel that you see a lot more in older anime, and I like it because it makes them more human and gives them a chance to be more relatable and understood before the series inevitably becomes darker. Something that I do have to say about the arc is that the rate of which Shin's strength grew was low-key fast. This pacing though is something that I really enjoy about the Kingdom anime. Shin went from some outback farm servant that only fought with wooden swords against his brother to taking down multiple assassins and skilled warriors. He literally goes toe-to-toe with Saji, and he is considered, apparently by himself though, to be the strongest swordsman in the world. At this point I'm like, alright bro, Shin is built different. He only the day before encountered his first couple assassins, and only a few minutes prior had his first real kill. But the first arc I think did a solid job in setting up the precedent for why Shin is this way. It's not like everything he does is an asshole. The entire point of his childhood was that Shin and Hyou prepared essentially nearly the entirety of their life for this opportunity to overcome any fight that would allow them to get closer to their dream on the battlefield. I mean, there's a reason why the story began with Shin having had 1,000 duels with Hyou, in which Hyou said they were trying their absolute hardest. If it weren't for using wooden swords, it would probably be simulating a life and death duel. In the first episode, they're shown to be dueling nearly immediately. Shin is not going toe-to-toe with Saji, and he's not folding these assassins if not for these 1,000 duels with Hyou, which would be, I'd imagine, years of experience built up using the sword. Honestly, Hyou might have been overall more skilled than Shin at the beginning, because his sword skills are on par with Shin. He had zero difficulty leading and organizing troops against the Yoki army soldiers. Like, he sort of is more capable than Shin. But Shin, like Hyou said, has always had that vital flight response. That's the best way I can put it. It's a real thing. For humans, when it really matters and we are pushed beyond what we think is possible, that's when the body is able to perform greater than usual. But Shin's ability ability to do this is truly second to none. It does make you question it a bit, but I'm sure it's something that can be explained later on. But yeah, first arc, very solid. Solid is the best way to describe it. And then onto the final episodes. Bayou, the Mountain King's lieutenant, is shown to be a beast when it comes to martial might. Sei beats the crap out of Seikyou after giving a badass speech about why he'll never be king. That's badass speech number 3, by the way. First was declaring his dream of unifying all of China to Yotenwa, the Mountain King, saying he would destroy all borders, including unifying with the mountains. Not only does she harbor the same dream of unification, Yotenwa is also awesome because she puts herself on the line immediately to fight alongside Sei, folding everyone in her way. Second, at the Royal Gate, Sei was urging his troops to keep holding on, to not give up, to fight on and keep the hope alive, to have faith that shit, this servant boy would perform. Sei's loyalty here is great. Oki at the end of the arc also pulls up an absolutely no diffs Geeko, an elite soldier on horseback, such a fraud. And then Oki goes on to almost threaten Sei about his capability in leading the state of Qin, to which Sei stands firm in his dream and essentially convinces Oki that he is truly dedicated to his path. But still, he doesn't have the strength to back up his words. Yet. We think Shin is strong. Oki, we can't even comprehend what happened. Like what? His level is so far above Shin's right now. There's no way he's catching up anytime soon. I can't lie. He seemed like a real deal villain. To even think about killing his own king. This guy's so lame for threatening my dog. But at the same time, he is hella cool. But yeah, that's the core of what happened in the first arc. They obviously do eventually meet Minister Ryofui, who was an absolute bastard. He had the audacity to mock Sei in front of the entire royal court, saying that he was waiting for Sei to die in the rebellion to return, and Shin, of all people, had to calm him down. I will say though, the side characters introduced here are legit. Ryofui's 4 pillars of Ryo, Shueisha, Mobu, Rishi, Saitaku, 4 powerful men, all juggernauts specializing in their respective areas. Military, law, diplomacy. Shin has no plan. He couldn't scream out or do anything when he saw them. At this point I'm like, I know Shin and Sei are the main characters and they'll win in the end one way or another, but how are we letting them walk into our territory and smack their nuts in our face? With the conclusion of this rebellion and the main villain introduced, it was time to go to the Keiyou Campaign arc. Shin is going to his very first war campaign, the first step in his dream. All in all, I thought this first arc did a great job in setting up the Keiyou Campaign arc. Now that Shin has gotten his foot in the door with some of his own money and land, it's time to pull up to the battlefield, take some heads, and leave with the juiciest achievement. So Shin arrives on the Darkhand Plains, and for the first time, it gets to really soak it in. All of this bloodshed and fighting is where his dream is given the chance to come to fruition. This is where we get Shin's first feat of strength after fully recovering from the rebellion. Because remember, Shin has not gotten to rest since he fought Joker, the assassin from that fateful night. So there's plenty of armies, and Shin happened to get assigned to the 4th, who were given the toughest task, to charge a wall of shielded spear wielders with only infantry. Nobody in the history of the warring states has been able to overcome this as a single foot soldier, probably. But Shin obviously is someone who can accomplish such a feat. He runs towards them on his own, leaps over the wall and creates an opening from the inside. And everyone's thinking, what is going on? In the entire history of Wave, we've never been breached by a child. Point is, Shin is clearly stronger than what he was in his first arc. And the pacing can feel pretty fast, but I think it makes sense how Shin can improve at such a rapid rate. The higher the stakes, the greater Shin is able to perform. It is the precedent that was set in the previous arc, and Sei said it himself. Shin has always had, for the most part, the ability, but honing that killing intent is a whole different beast. It's different when you're fighting an opponent to the death rather than your brother. Then we get a real threat that shows up. Keiyou is a general, places his full strategic abilities on display, using the famed Wei war chariots to body the entire 4th army and nearly Shin as well. He pretty much said, yeah, alright buddy, Shin has trained and experienced a lot for such a short amount of time, and this allowed him to improve by miles, but he's not general level. Yet. This is what I really like about the Keiyou Campaign arc. They build Shin up to eventually be enough of a threat to make an impact without doing something outlandish like Shin slaying a great general in his first campaign, within quite a short amount of episodes. With the lessons he learns from people like Bakukoshin or General Oki throughout the arc, it makes sense. There's not really a point in the Keiyou Campaign arc where I feel something that Shin does is an insane ass pull. Again, the pacing can be fast in terms of how he grows, but it's on point for Shin's character. Anyways, Shin, by what can only be called the luck of the gods, or in other words, his newest female comrade Kyokai's genius tactics, survives the onslaught caused by Wei's war chariots, which beset literally the whole rest of the 4th army. After all that, Shin has to climb the hill where General Kyugen is located and try to survive yet another onslaught, which is like them saying just because one measly group of infantry miraculously lived doesn't mean the grand scheme of the battle was actually affected. Shin ends up deflecting this rain of arrows while fighting up the hill and slays Wei's master archer Korigen. And then Bakukoshin and Shin at the top of the hill encounter General Kyugen face to face. Now, Kyugen starts off impressive, honestly, and finishes very unlikable. But it's a little unfair because he ended up killing my boy Bakukoshin, who I didn't like at first, but actually ended up loving because he was so real. The one thing that he said, Shin will never forget, that the sacrifice of all their comrades never amounts to nothing. And it feels so right, because he then drives his sword into the neck of General Kyugen and goes out swinging. He even lets Shin claim the head as his crowning achievement as he slowly bleeds out. Bakukoshin really became a beloved hero in the end. Though what they achieved here was important, they all realized this was only one of 4 locations. The other armies were still at full strength, and no way were they going to be able to advance or even safely descend the hill. What a surprise! So they have to think of something. That's when Commander Heki sees something peculiar on the cliffside in the distance. Oki and his hilarious looking Lieutenant To spectating the current battle. Turns out it is a crime to join a battle without being appointed by the king prior, but General Oki comes up with a perfect excuse. He simply enjoys the view from atop the hill Shin is currently at, and he will cut down anyone that stops him from approaching it. To with his stupid face and voice agrees, and it is so funny whenever this duo is on screen. But once Oki arrives, this is the first time that Shin meets such a figure and he can't breathe. He is setting his eyes physically on what he wants to achieve and even surpass for the first time. This brings me back to the point that Shin isn't entirely skilled yet. He still has many weak points when it comes to understanding what it takes to be a general, even though he has learnt a lot from Sei, Shobunkun, and Heki. But Oki ends up helping Shin with figuring it out, saying something quite interesting, that war at the end of the day belongs to its generals. From the way soldiers are deployed, to the sacrifices from start to finish, every life, every tactic is conjured up by the great generals of each army, all for the sake of winning the war, which is why Oki says that war at the end of the day belongs to its generals. Amazing. We'll get back to this, because the way that it all comes together by the end of the Keiyou Campaign arc is beyond beautiful. Anyway, Oki accidentally helps them out. They're about to charge into the enemy, with Heki suggesting Oki take the lead, but meanwhile, the enemy commander-in-chief, Great General Gokei, was already deploying a defensive measure at the bottom of the hill. And while this was happening, Shin's commander-in-chief, Great General Jukio, finally made a direct move. Remember what was said before, no sacrifice ever amounts to nothing. So Jukio, seeing success on the 4th Army's battlefield, not only committed his entire force, but he himself chose to capitalize on this opportunity and personally join the fight. I didn't know what Jukio was planning or had in mind, but it was explained in the end by Oki. There was just something so weird about this guy. I'm like, he's definitely cooking something, but he doesn't seem like he even thinks before acting. You'd think a general would be a little bit more meticulous and a little less crazy. And then onto the most tense moment. Great General Jukio, Great General Gokei. They match up in a duel to decide the outcome of the entire war. Before I continue with that, I have to say, Jukio is too cool. His style was aggressive, and he wastes no time placing pressure on the enemy headquarters. But he is one insane MF. And despite Oki's soldiers being described as demon gods, when led by Oki himself, Oki said Jukio when leading his soldiers is even stronger. So what does that say? Even when Heki got in his feelings when Oki said war belonged to its generals, Jukio used Heki's sudden flank attack as an opportunity to utilize a pincer attack, since Gokei was low-key beating his ass before Heki joined in. Jukio is a weird guy, very unconventional, but now it all starts to make sense when Oki took us and Shin to school once again and introduced one of the most epic and intriguing concepts in the entire Kingdom anime, the eternal theme of instinctive generals versus clever generals. In other words, war will always consist of generals like Jukio, who rely on instinctive actions and intuition, and those like Gokei, who rely on logic. When Oki said this, I thought, okay, we really keep cooking, huh? Shin must have been so inspired, since he then went on to destroy a general that thoroughly underestimated him, Shuki, known as an apparent general slam. Anyways, back to the duel. Gokei puts up a fight, but then bang, Jukio had enough with the sob stories. He wanted to know Gokei's reason for fighting, but once that was done, he didn't even break a sweat and cleaved him in half. There's just so much to love about this Keiyou Campaign arc, and so the war ends in a Shin victory. The remaining Wei soldiers are too scared to continue, since Oki with his virtually untouched army, is still observing them from an advantageous vantage point. To end the arc, one last strategic masterclass, and no surprise, it's Oki. If it wasn't clear already, Jukio confirmed that without joining the fight, Oki's presence alone placed immense pressure on the Wei army, making them think, why on earth hasn't Shin's greatest general made a move? This mini arc is only 2 episodes, but in these 2 episodes it felt like we got so much out of it. The beginning of the arc starts off lighthearted. Shin was recently promoted to 100-man commander, which is awesome, but more importantly, he was able to buy his first set of armor. For someone like Shin and his upbringing, that's like purchasing a Lamborghini. To make things even sweeter for Shin, on his way home he runs into Kyokai, one of his war buddies, who came all this way just to tell him to be careful about the way he fights. Imagine that, a female comrade you slept alongside, bled alongside, fought alongside, and she goes to your home with the sole reason of being worried about your safety. Bro's living the dream. But on a more serious note, later in the episode she emphasizes this. She's not wrong. Shin has been quite reckless in all of his past battles, but his response might be surprising to some. Shin already has the maturity to recognize that there is more to success on the battlefield than relying on momentum and shouting alone. A real fight requires way more. For Shin to say this is very mature, and nicely represents the growth he had as a result of his direct experiences with fighting so far rather than direct mentorship. See guys, Shin isn't dumb. Additionally, I really do enjoy the playfulness between Shin and Kyokai. It is very light romance without being overbearing. First of all, while sleeping next to each other in Shin's home, Shin can't help but stare at Kyokai because of how cute she really is when he looks closely. Kyokai does her best tsundere cosplay and proceeds to call him an idiot. Classic. Right after this, out of the blue, she calls him weird. Shin of course is bamboozled by this, but not for long, because she says it's okay because she's weird too. That is game if I've ever seen it. Another instance, Shin earlier in the episode brought up the time where he and Kyokai rode on the horse together. He got all shy because she was sitting right behind him, and that's when he figured out she was actually a girl. This seems so irrelevant, but it's a nice touch because Kyokai trusts Shin and chose to be vulnerable with him, even though it's not easy being a woman in the warring states. Though we know what they all say. There's 2 sides to every coin. Yes, Kyokai has her eyes set on revenge because what else is there to live for? But Shin says something very surprising in her eyes, that once she's done, she needs to get her ass back here immediately because she is his beloved comrade, and that'll never change. He has already counted Kyokai as part of his 100-man unit and won't settle for anyone else. He says there will always be a spot for her. Game. So this is the first highlight of this arc, the development of their beautiful relationship. Moving on, a question all of us probably have is, why is Kyokai so damn strong? Well, this arc actually delves into this and reveals to us Kyokai's backstory. If I had to explain it in a single word, it would definitely be tragic. Before we dive into Kyokai's direct history, it's important to know the context of what she is, because she's not a normal human. Kyokai is someone that was born a Seikyou, or in other words, as part of a clan of female assassins. Now, this is where it gets juicy. The Seikyou always viewed the sword as a sacred object to be used in holy rites, and not originally made for the purpose of killing. As a result, Seikyou are essentially priestesses who dance with their swords to then summon divine power, and this is where Kyokai gets her insane strength from. But ironically enough, the Seikyou use this dance to kill. Now onto Kyokai's direct history. Though the Seikyou are a clan, there is technically only one person that represents them and is known as the Seikyou. To decide this, in a brutal rite known as the Ritual, multiple tribes within the clan nominate 2 candidates, who all then fight to the death until only one person is left standing, and they take up the Seikyou title. In Kyokai's ritual specifically, she was chosen with her sister Kyosho to take part. Here comes the tragedy. Kyokai and Kyosho are speaking about tomorrow's ritual. Kyosho always dreamt of seeing the outside world, but despite this, she still didn't want Kyokai to die and wanted the same dream for her. It didn't matter though, because Kyokai was already set on sacrificing herself, so she goes to sleep with this plan in mind. Come the next day, Kyokai wakes up and finds that the ritual is already over. What? She looks over at the windowsill. Someone made her oversleep with incense. Kyokai then runs over to the battlefield, frantically looking for her sister, but she can't find her. That means she won. She's the new Seikyou, but she could not be more wrong. There laid a broken sword, her sister's, snapped in two, and right next to it, her lifeless body. This wasn't even the worst part. The worst part is that as soon as the ritual began, Kyosho got jumped by pretty much every single other candidate. She had no chance to begin with. So essentially, Essentially, Kyokai lives with the sole purpose of revenge, to kill Yurin, the one who plotted against Kyosho and is the current Shiyou. This is the second highlight of this arc, Kyokai's entire story motivation. Now we have the Kaio 10 plotline. The only thing we know about 10 right now is that she is some little bird girl that happened to run into Shin and Sei and can now be that little bit closer to her dream of being stinking rich by knowing the king. Though while Shin and Kyokai talk in the house, 10 goes outside to reflect. Her whole life has been about one thing, survival. Whether she had to steal or plot with others to hurt people, she did whatever she needed to survive for as long as she could remember. This all changed when she met Shin and Sei. Her life became exciting. The rebellion even was a thrill, though it was dangerous. But now with things calming down, she realizes it was only because of Shin she was able to feel this way. And so, seeing Shin becoming a 100-man commander, Heki commanding 1,000 men, Shobunkun growing as an official, and Sei as a king, she feels inadequate. Going with the flow and life is just surviving all over again. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. Everyone is risking their life and moving forward while she remains still. This can be relatable to many people, so I think 10's journey is actually quite a good one. By the end of episode 23, 10 resolves that the next time Shin leaves for a war, she will also leave to seek a place where she is able to belong, somewhere she doesn't have to use her muscles. There must be something she can do, intriguing, and something to look forward to. This is the third highlight of this arc. Kaio 10 might not be liked by all, but has great potential. Now, this is a training arc, so you might be wondering, where's the training? Well, in episode 24, it begins with Shin asking his Uber driver En to take him on a trip. How exciting. Not so much for En though, because Shin actually wants to go to General Oki's territory, or as Shin would say, General Fat Lips. Which terrifies En. We'll get back to this. First, it is important to know why Shin is seeking out Oki in the first place. Yes, he wants to get stronger, but Shin recently found out from Sei that Oki is the last surviving member of a legendary military tandem of past known as Chin's 6 great generals. So epic. Of course, there had to be more to Oki than his juicy lips. The 6 great generals were a collective of generals that dominated China during the reign of King Shou, Qin's king of 3 generations ago, who would go on to be known as the god of the battlefield. This is because not only did this tandem make Qin the most feared of all the states, but every time Qin's armies began marching, enemy states would seal off their gates, fearing they might encounter one of the 6, that their men would inform them that Hikuki or Okotsu or Kosho or Shibusaku or Kyo or of course Oki were at their gates. But the title of a Qin 6 Great was not only that. There were 2 things that made them formidable and unique. First, the special freedom to wage war whenever and wherever, and secondly, a loyalty to their king and each other that could only be likened to the unwavering nature of iron. Even just hearing about them, I can understand and feel the same excitement as Shin. Now that we know some background, we can shift over to Shin's arrival at Oki's territory, where he starts knocking on the gate, to which To opens it, only to quickly close it upon seeing Shin. This guy is too funny. So it seems like Shin's attempt to visit Oki unannounced has ended in failure. At least it feels like that. But not long before, Oki just happens to return from training and runs into Shin. There we go, a lucky break. So now Shin is feasting his eyes on a general's castle, something Hyou and him could only dream of, before the scene quickly cuts to him sharing a bath with Oki and multiple of his soldiers. Talk about interesting. Anyway, Oki cuts to the chase. Why is Shin here? It can't simply be for training. I mean, you know Shobunkun, a seasoned warrior, who actually catches a huge stray because Shin says he ain't nothing. He wants to learn from Oki, a real deal great general, the last of Qin's 6 great generals. With that, Oki takes Shin to the fields to talk further. Here it gets even more juicy if this arc wasn't already. We learn about the nature of Qin's 6 great generals, their true nature, because this perspective comes from one of their own. Oki said something so hype, that it wasn't these 6 generals were selected to fill in the system. Rather, these 6 individuals were already devastating countless battlefields and slaying many enemies along the way, that their military fame spread across the entire Middle Kingdom, to the point enemies would kneel and surrender simply off their approach. So the system only existed to make things even easier for them to operate, on top of how easy it already was. Aura. This is what aura is. Corny, but true. To makes a great point to wrap this all up. The system is meaningless without the necessary personnel, and to this point, Oki says the reason why Qin's 6 great generals are hailed as a legend, and their strength is still remembered 3 generations later, is because despite many holding the title of general within Qin, after all this time, no one was worthy of picking up the mantle? Does this speak to the weakness of Chin's current strength? Or maybe does it speak more to the overwhelming might of Chin in the past? This is way too awesome. So learning about Chin's 6th grade generals is the 4th highlight of this arc for obvious reasons. Okay, that's all the background surrounding Chin's 6th grade generals done, for real this time. It is now time for the actual training part of the training arc. When Oki once again refers to Shin's ambition, he talks about it as if Shin wants to climb to his level as a great general, and he laughs in an almost One Piece-esque way about it, which is hilarious. But Shin comes in with a heavy correction. It isn't enough to climb to Oki's level. His dream, his wish, is to surpass the likes of Oki and become the greatest general in history. Because of this, Oki decides he likes Shin, and so comes the birth of their glorious master and student relationship. With this, Shin decides to ask Oki once again to officially train him, and in response, Oki rejects Shin, strips him of his sword, and kicks him off a cliff. What a surprising turn of events. Maybe the worst thing she can say isn't no. Little does Shin know though, the training has already begun. Oki has kicked Shin into an ongoing battle within one of Chin's stateless areas. This is the first of Oki's genius. It is perfect training because Oki wants Shin to subjugate the area without being a one-man sword carry. So how exactly does Oki want Shin to win? This is the challenge. This area happens to be home to the weakest tribe of all those vying for control. And on top of that, it just so happens that this tribe is made up of around 100 people. Oki really is a genius. This is no coincidence. To throw Shin into a battle perfectly matching the circumstances of someone recently promoted to 100-man commander. So Oki wants Shin to achieve victory through leadership, to be able to lead even the most ordinary of citizens. That's the deal. If Shin can overcome this challenge, Oki will then train him officially. Anyway, the challenge begins. Shin is already in the heat of the battle, and even though the scale of the battle is small, it is so cool seeing Shin almost acting as a general, leading at the vanguard and holding off the enemy to allow his army to regroup, and even acts as a temporary lieutenant and leads a group of citizens to reinforce Shin at the front. Could this be a sign of things to come? How did Oki manage to make such an insignificant battle hype? Continuing on, Shin uses what he learned during the Keiyou Campaign, telling everyone the fundamentals of a go, or in other words, fighting as a unit of 5. Using what Shin told them, the citizens were able to focus down one enemy at a time and wipe them out. Shin really is slowly becoming a proper commander. All in all, remember what I said at the start? Is a training arc for learning how to be a leader? Is it learning how to fight the best of the best? It's neither. Shin was able to seek out that mentor that taught him exactly what he needed to know, that these things work together. Oki said it best. There is difficulty in leading, but that is why he wants Shin to learn it now, because great strength, or in other words, the ability to fight the best of the best, occurs as a result of fighting as a group, as a result of Shin being able to lead. So this is the 5th and final highlight for this arc. The Battle of Bayou arc. Wow, I think it was beautiful. Obviously, it's no surprise that the animation frickin' sucks. What can you do? That aside though, I really want to say that I did enjoy it. This is how we're going to do it. I'm going to give you guys my top 10 favorite moments. It was so difficult. Even though I have 3 honorable mentions along with my top 10 favorite moments, and still that wasn't enough. And honestly, I might have missed some. If you guys have watched the Kingdom anime before, let me know what your favorite moment is in Kingdom Season 1, specifically the Battle of Bayou arc. We're gonna start with number 10. Kano proclaiming that Oki's flying arrow has arrived. So this is where we get to see Shin's signature jump attack. Not only that, but we get to see Shin actually show out in this war. In Oki's return to the battlefield, Shin is the one to get the first kill. I think that's freaking awesome. And it was hype too, seeing everyone cheer on Shin. And I mean, the manga will never be able to give us that voice acting, that music, the motion that we get in the anime. I really like that. Number 9, Oki completely humbles Shomo. Oh my gosh. This was already good in the manga. I do think in the anime it was a little goofy, but that's not to say I didn't enjoy it. If the anime got anything right, they got the lips right. They animated the lips perfectly. They're always juicy, always scrumptious, always plump, and that's what we like to see. Oki humbled his ass. Number 8, everybody goes nuclear after seeing Oki ride to the front. He didn't even say anything. Apparently that's one of the things Oki always did as part of his old routine as one of the 6 great generals of Chin. He would ride off to the front, say nothing, raise his glaive, People just go crazy, bro. It's moments like that that make you change your mind completely. Because I don't know about you guys, I thought Oki was a whole villain at the start of the story. But this whole Battle of Bayou arc does such a good job making you love him to eventually... If y'all seen it, I'll get to that. Number 7, Mobu. Martial might. Too strong for strategy. His martial might overwhelms any type of strategy and tactics. You're telling me he goes up against Haku, the general in China. By the way, I didn't know this. I forgot about this. He's known as the defensive general. This is the defensive player of the year. And Mobu owned him. I think the main thing to point out here is that Mobu, someone that even I thought was stupid or doesn't use his brain, actually put on a masterclass. He knew that we had foot soldiers that were farmers, that were conscripts, that were fresh blood mainly. So what do? You go on your normal aggressive charge, but not in too deep, pause, to give them greater confidence, which then leads to greater morale. Hey, I like that from Mobu, I really do. It shows a lot of character development already. And we just met this guy like last arc or something. Number 6, we have Shin hyping everybody up before they go up against Hoken. Mind you, Shin just got his ass handed to him. Literally just got his ass handed to him. And so everybody's getting hyped up. We got this, bro. We can kill Hoken. And so with everyone working together, Shin ends up getting a solid hit on Hoken. I'm like, alright, okay. We might actually have a chance. Even though Shin got a hit in, it shows his potential, but we got to remember this is Oki's villain. This is Oki's rival. This is Oki's person to take down. Now, I know I said top 10 moments. I'll let you guys know right now, not all of these are going to be moments. Some of these are going to be legit sequences. They're going to be entire storylines, or the whole episode was a great moment for me. Like this one, number 5, Oki explaining the brilliance of his strategy. And what I mean by this is it all started when he sent the Heishin unit to go attack Fuki. Like Shin said earlier, a Bane has a Bane strength. It might have seemed insignificant or too little to disrupt Fuki in his perspective, but Oki knew what he was doing. Oki knew that most of Fuki's camp was full of cavalry, was full of horsemen, and when they're not moving, they suck. And when the Heishin unit is already in that close, he can't really come up with a plan. It's over. Oki in the previous arcs already told us about the importance of strategic versus instinctual generals. And Fuki, who is a purely strategical general and inexperienced in close range battle, I mean, it's raps for him. The Heishin unit being that close, it's raps. The best part about this though is Fuki saying that his strategies are flawless. But even the most flawless of plans have a slight margin for error, and so he says, he tries to rationalize or come up with the excuse that the 100-man unit somehow slipping through should be accounted for in that slight margin for error, so he shouldn't really lose the battle or lose his life because of that. But that's where Oki got him. That's the best part. That's where Oki got him. It's precisely because Oki predicted that Fuki would move up his right wing in reaction to Oki sending out his left wing that he gave the Heishin unit that mission. If anything, Oki proved to us nothing is a coincidence, especially with him. He doesn't just do stuff. Everything has a meaning. The most impressive thing is him putting Fuki in checkmate without actually doing anything himself, in terms of he's not riding into battle himself. He's not telling everyone the grand plan or the end goal of all these little things he's saying. He just did them. He's Hikaru. Oki is the Hikaru of Kingdom. This guy's a pre-move genius. And in the end, he got the checkmate anyways. What a beast. Number 4, Bito still carrying Shin with the arrows in his body. My boy's coughing up blood. My boy's a literal farmer. You know, people always joke about Michael Jordan playing with farmers or plumbers or against plumbers. Shin has literal plumbers and farmers as teammates. That's what I'm saying. The argument's stupid when they say he was playing against or with plumbers. Hey, Bito a plumber, a farmer, and he clutching up. He important to the team. Nah, but real though, Bito telling Shin how much he believes in him, how much he believes that Shin will be the greatest general, that he knows he can do it. It's such a beautiful moment. He tells Shin to keep on moving forward. Hold everyone in your heart, Shin, while you fight. Nah, I was so sad though, I can't lie, because he got my ass too. When he pretended to die, and Shin was laughing too, because he was like, bro, why would you do that, man? And then he actually died. Hara's wrong for that, I can't lie. They really did us like that. Don't even get me started with Yuri, that village chick. Why does she have to hit the sacred stone for? Forgot what episode it was, but earlier she hit the sacred stone when they were praying. Say, hey. Okay, I was about to say, when you mess with time, time tends to mess back, but that doesn't even make sense what I just said. Y'all get what I mean though. Number 3, the worst day of my life. I didn't want to believe Oki's time was near. It hurt so much. But a silver lining was that Oki acknowledged To to have never been weaker than him in the first place. He's always been just as strong. When he gave everything to To, he entrusted everything to To. That was a beautiful moment. But bro, To freaking clawing into his own hand, trying to stay strong. Oh man, that hurt, bro. Man, maybe freaking sold. But at least our boy Shin's up next. Oki died knowing that he passed on his legacy to a young sprout. He passed on his glaive. Let's be real, he probably didn't know. He passed on his legacy to the main character. But the story really did us like that. Did Mobu sell or did the story sell? It was a good choice though. Still, I'm allowed to complain. They're really Ned Stark this. They white-bearded us. Bro. Number 2, we flash back a little bit. Even though he's pretty much 1 foot in the grave already, Oki still wants to take Shin to school. The view of a general. Riding with Oki, riding behind Oki, getting backshots from Oki. Probably a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And Shin gets to do all 3. But Oki's right. Shin is currently riding a general's horse. This is how it feels to be a general. Looking at all the enemy faces. Looking at your allies' faces. The sky, the ground, the bodies. You hear all the screaming. The action is right next to you because Oki's the general. This is the view that a general sees. Shin is living through the eyes of Oki, even if it's just for a little bit. And I think that was awesome. Here we go. Before we go to our number 1 spot, I have 3 honorable mentions. Not enough, to be honest. I can't say everything. I might as well just say the whole season was freaking legendary. But first honorable mention, Yotenwa, describing the Zong-Nu as absolute monsters. For us to find out that Riboku, this mysterious man named Riboku, slayed 100,000 of them with ease. Not like Mobu, not crushing their heads, but slaughtering them through tactics alone. A one-sided dicking down. As much as we can hate Riboku as Chin stands, this has to be one of the most badass entrances. Riboku, known as the man that is about to pincer Oki, that destroyed the famed Northern Horseman tribes, and is then revealed as one of the 3 great heavens of Shao, and everything makes sense. Of course, it had to be someone of that caliber to be able to defeat Oki. Second honorable mention. This kind of ties into what I just said, but when Riboku finally does do the pincer on Oki, he reveals what his plan was to us, the audience, because even we didn't know. And we find out that Riboku is a master of information lockdown, of information manipulation. You're telling me Yotenwa was actually there in person and with her own eyes said 100,000 Zong-Nu were defeated, but Riboku said he actually decimated 200,000. Holy freaking crap. Yotenwa didn't even get the exact numbers right. That is scary, bro. Riboku deserves to be glazed at this point in time because it's pretty impressive what he did against Oki. Oki's a monster. And he respected him as perhaps the greatest of the 6 great generals of Qin. The reason why I have so many honorable mentions is because I had to talk about all these. Can't leave them out. The third one is Keiyou. The whole story of Keiyou as a person, but this specific moment, her come up. Dominating everybody to the point of becoming the 6th great general of Qin. She became someone that rivaled the other 5 great generals. And I'm pretty sure she did all this at the age of 16 to 18. I'm not sure, that's just my prediction, but that's insane. This is something that I don't think everyone realizes. The system wasn't something made and then they picked people to fill it. These guys were so great that King Sho was like, you know what? I need to make a system for these 6 to be able to reign free. It just so happened they had 6 beasts. And Keiyou was the only female great general to reach this rank. Psst, that's crazy, bro. And she a baddie. And then we come to number 1. The number 1 moment. Heartbreaking, but at the same time, shameless. It doesn't matter that Hoken's been training for 9 years, Oki still beats his ass. He shatters his glaive. He's ready to end Hoken with this last swing, but then the rattiest thing happens. Oki 1 second away from killing Hoken. Shin 1 second away from saving Oki by killing Geika. But it's too late. 1 second too late. We're all 1 second too late. Oki takes a shot in the back. An arrow in the back, and then Hoken stabs him. That hurt me. And even when he's at death's door, Oki can't help but aura farm. This entire season he was aura farming. This entire arc he was aura farming. He talks about the importance of being a general, the title of a general, all the things that they do, why the name or the title of a general carries so much weight. They're constantly dancing with death's door throughout their journey to then reach that rank. And then they receive not only the responsibility, but the great honor of commanding the lives of hundreds of thousands. And so Oki finishes with one thing. Hoken, you ask who I am? I am one of the greatest generals in the world, and that is by far my favorite moment in the season. But yeah, man, freaking Hoken the hoe, Oki's my goat, Raboku's a hoe, but I gotta admit, I might be doing tricks on it, but I'm very impressed by Raboku. Come on, bro. He took everything into account when it came to fighting Oki. Yes, it pisses me off a little bit that Oki technically lost to slightly faster horses, but Raboku knew that. He knew Oki would misjudge their speed, even by a little bit. And hey, to be able to see that legendary battle of wits between Raboku and Oki, even though Oki didn't actually know Raboku, he didn't actually meet him, which is crazy. But that was awesome to see. A battle of the greatest, a battle of the titans, a chess match. But yeah, if I missed the moment, let me know what you guys thought was the best moment of the Battle Bayou arc in the comment section below.